Hi, I'm Sarah Veblen, and I have a longtime student and friend with me, Nancy Tafoya. I'm on the East Coast in Baltimore. She's on the West Coast in California. And we are having a conversation today about purposeful sewing while in transition. And we will have a couple of different videos for this. It'll probably be in two parts. We'll see where things go. And today we are focusing on talking about what those transitions are. This is apropos to Nancy's life, who she's been going through a pretty interesting and sometimes stressful transition, but that happens to all of us on and off through our lives. So Nancy, thank you so much for doing this conversation with me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So I think this happens to lots of us in different times in our lives, that all of a sudden we look in our closet and we go, I don't know what I want to wear. And that could be we're just having an off day and we're tired of our clothes. But very often I think it stems from that we are going through a transition or have just recently been through a transition. And so we're not quite sure how we want to present ourselves. We don't know what are we even comfortable wearing. And I think you found that to be true recently, Nancy.
So very much, and I harken back to when I was in my early career, and I wanted to be forceful and an authority figure and all that kind of stuff. So I would tend to go shopping and shop like major brand names that could resonate in a room, St. John or something like that, in order to be that presence. And then, as you say, I was in this phase of life right now. I've gone through a series of transitions because I transitioned from full-time work at a fairly senior level into all of a sudden retired. Oh my God, completely different world. And then I'm now transitioning from being married for 30 years to being single again, which is again a completely different transition, and one that I don't wish on anybody, but all of a sudden you start to think about not only who you are, but how you want to present yourself and how do you want to be seen by the other people in the room. What kind of person are you trying to represent, and how do people actually see that? And a large part of it I've come to realize is whatever you pull out of your closet that day and how you wear it. I mean, obviously a part of it is how you carry yourself, but the colors, how you're feeling about being bright or spunky or more demure or laid back, all of that impacts the immediate impression that people take away when they turn around and see you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as much as we want to think that people are seeing us and not our clothes, our clothes do make an impact. And part of it is, I think, how we're feeling in those clothes is part of what
Right.
makes that impact. It's not just the clothes.
So, for example, I was always surprised. I like red. And I know in conversations with you, red is not the color that you're comfortable in. So I never see you in red, even though I've seen a lot of you. And you've told me it's because you just don't feel comfortable inside the color. Whereas for me, red is like a happy, forceful color, and I tend to be drawn to it.
Yeah, and for the people listening to our conversation, I would encourage you in this segment of it to think about some of the words that Nancy and I use. You just said it was, I think, a happy and a forceful color. And to me, red is a happy color and it is forceful, but the reason I have a hard time wearing it is I often feel like it's too forceful for me. I have to, some days you wake up and you go, I could rule the world today. I could conquer anything. And if I have a day like that, that's a day that I could probably choose something red. But very often what I say to think to myself and have said to Nancy and other people I've talked to about these things, it takes a lot of energy for me to wear red because of that forcefulness of the color. Now, other people might not think of it as a forceful color, but I do. There's shades of red. There's a few shades of blue red that I look nice in. It's not that it's a bad color for me. It just takes a heck of a lot of energy for me to wear it. So internal energy. And very often I feel like I want to reserve that energy for interacting or the things I'm concentrating on or whatever it is that's going on in that day for my life. When you were wearing red, Nancy, when you were an upper level executive, can you talk a little bit more about how you felt when you would wear red and go into a big meeting or just go in the office and you knew you had some difficult conversations to make?
Yeah, because I think a little bit is also a little esoteric, but when you talk about how you feel when you're wearing red, you may be conquering the world that day, but conquering the world with force is not your style.
Right.
So even if you're like on top of the world, that doesn't reflect how you are going to manage being on top of the world. Whereas when I was in the corporate life, I needed to walk into a room and have people immediately know that it was my way or the highway, or that I was controlling whatever process or discussion was about to be had. So for me, red was one of those things that immediately told people that it was going to be my way or the highway, and they had to deal with that and get used to dealing with that very, very quickly. So I used to wear a lot of extremely strong, bold colors, red, cobalt blue, black was always a good one, but with some really vibrant color next to it. One of my favorite combinations was purple and yellow, because it's such an unusual combination that it pops, and people immediately assume that if you're wearing something so unusual, you have to be a strong personality. So even though I didn't always feel like I was this strong personality, it gave me this aura and kind of a shield that went into the room with me, and people assumed that I was going to be that personality. So it was easier for me to actually be it. So
Yes.
whereas it's draining for you, it's because it's not a right fit in terms of what your personality is. Whereas for me, it was supportive, pardon the dog. For me, it was supportive and protective in a way.
And that was in that time period when you were
Right.
upper level executive. And I will hazard to add in a fairly male dominated
Very. There are
world.
a lot of times where I was the only woman in the room.
Yeah.
A lot of black suits and me.
Right. And so it makes perfect sense to me that because of your position in the companies that you worked for, you needed to come in and let people know from the get-go that you were the one who was in charge of this meeting. And
Yeah,
you were able to do that in part by what you wore. It was a statement of authority.
right.
So
And then
what
at home, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to ask a question, but what do you have a follow-up thought about that?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so then when you were thinking about retiring and then going into retirement, what happened to you when you looked at your wardrobe? What did you experience then?
So that actually comes to what I was about to say. So the strong spirit kind of colors and wardrobes and silhouettes work for the office, but it doesn't necessarily work as well with your spouse. So for social engagements, I had to kind of temper the work strength and authority to something that if it was a work related social that had some strength, but some softness around it, so that my husband could also be part of the scene. And
Right.
so
So
when
this
I
is before
retired,
retirement, just is still navigating the work
yeah,
world. So yeah, that makes perfect sense because you aren't always in the office or in meetings, but you've got
right,
some social events or surrounding to do with your work, but then you just were Nancy at home too.
right. So when I retired, what I realized is my at-home wardrobe became 100% of my wardrobe. Um, and that's how would I describe it? I still had strong colors because I do tend to be a strong personality, kind of a shock to myself to say that, but yes. Um, but it had to be a gentler presentation of the colors and of me. So my husband was 6'6" and a big guy. So it had to be strong enough that I would still be seen when I was with him and standing next to him rather than just in his shadow all the time. But I realized that I was freer to play with different silhouettes, not, strong shoulders, could have more ruffles, could be a little swishy, what I called my, the garden party dress kind of thing. Um, and so my retirement edged more to that, but then also in retirement, you also edge to much more casual. So I never actually went the jogger pant route. I tend to distrust elastic waistbands completely. So I haven't done that until recently. Um, but I realized that I became much more casual in retirement, and to the place that, particularly with COVID, trying to find something now to go to wear to a meeting or a social event is much more of a challenge out of my closet because I became golf shirts and shorts and mucking around in the garden clothes.
Right.
So
So starting to define your retirement wardrobe, it went very casual. And I think lots of us who have lived through COVID have found that COVID really changed things. I can't tell you how many Zoom classes I taught with a nice looking top on and with sweatpants on and slippers on below when it was
yeah,
cold. Because nobody could see that. And I think it was
yeah,
well known that almost all of us were doing that as well. But
yeah,
for me, I needed that nice looking top on in order to kind of go into work mode to be able to give
right.
my presentation. So the clothes helped to set the stage. And there were times I thought, I can't wear sweatpants for this particular lecture or the group I'm presenting to. I need to have a little bit more whole feeling of a presence of being this person who knows what they're talking about when it comes to fitting and garment
Yeah,
making.
because it is a transition, even if you're at home in front of a camera, it is a transition from home life to professional. And so we all have ways that we manage that transition. Um, Clothing, I think, is one of the easiest because when you put on the suit, whether it's just from here to here, or whether it's a dress or a fancy blouse or something, when you put the suit on, you're at work. I mean, even Wall Street has figured out that even though they went to casual dress before COVID and they started with casual Fridays and then they went casual every day, productivity went down.
Oh, really?
People didn't work the same way. And so they actually, Wall Street and high street finance actually reinstituted a, my dog at this window, reinstituted a dress code so that people knew that they were putting on work attire to go to work to work. So there is something about actually that transitional phase every day of getting up, getting out of your PJs and getting into work clothes.
Yeah. Yeah. And COVID was a hard period of time for just about everybody, as far as I could tell. And then coming out of COVID, I had let my wardrobe really slide. I was scrambling to figure out how do I transition from teaching in person so much to teaching solely online. And there are the stresses that were going on surrounding the COVID epidemic. And then I hadn't been sewing for myself. I was focusing on other aspects of my work, and COVID starts to alleviate, and we're starting to be with more people. And all of a sudden, I thought, I don't have anything to wear. Yeah. And I frankly was so sick of my sweatshirts and sweatpants. It's like, I don't want to put that on again. I want to have
Yeah.
something where, for me, is I want to feel a little bit more put together. And behind all of these external transitions that we're talking about, I think there is that we're also at the same time talking about the feeling aspect of it underneath it.
Right, right. I totally agree. And then that for me, that the transition lengthened with the divorce and the process of separation, where all of a sudden now you realize that when you walk out of the house and you're somebody, you're not half of a somebody, you're a whole somebody. And how do you want the world to see you? I mean, obviously for the first, as you well know, and having listened to me, for the first 6 months, I still walked out feeling like half of the whole. And I am sure that's how people saw me, because that's how I saw myself. And now trying to figure out what that whole person is and how I want to be seen by people is a completely different type of transition. It's internal. It's very much internal, but how do you identify it and how do you present it?
Right.
So colors obviously, and I don't know, just joggers just still don't have a place in my life as comfortable as they may be. Because I want to be seen as being vibrant, and joggers to me are just too relaxed to be vibrant. So
Right. And somebody else might be able to wear joggers and feel vibrant, but you
yeah,
aren't. And that's
yeah,
the point. I think that's one of the points that's so important, is to figure out that when you are wearing something, what is it that you're feeling like? And do you try on a few different things so that you start to get a different feeling, that you're searching for, okay, now I feel confident, or I feel put together, or I feel a little bit sexy, or I feel a little,
mm,
feminine, or I have I don't mean to put those words in any sort of exclusionary way to
right.
antithesis of those words, but those are the words that I'm familiar with because of my self-identification. But
But also, you told me once that when you were doing bespoke clothing and you were working with clients, rather than having them talk about the lines of a design or a fabric, you would ask them how they felt or how they wanted to feel when they were
yeah,
wearing the garment that you were about to construct.
right.
And then getting them to talk about that.
I almost always, not in the beginning, it took me a while to figure out, and I figured it out with brides, and then I realized it was apropos to any and all of my custom clients. And if I had a new person come to me, I would say, well, bring a few garments that you feel really comfortable wearing, and 3, 4, 5, and I would have them put them on and tell me why. And I said, it's not that the whole outfit or the whole garment is always super comfortable, but so I would start to get a feel for watching them in these clothes, what made them comfortable. And then I found the most telling thing is, and this is with brides that gave me the entry into this, I would say, on your wedding day, how do you want to feel? Because if I said, what do you want to look like? I got a totally different
Yeah.
answer. But if I asked them what they wanted to feel, that gave me a much, even though it's um, an idea, it's not something concrete. It's not a low V neckline, which is concrete. It actually was what gave me the most insight into how to design for them,
Hmm.
to help
That's true,
evoke
because
that.
I remember shopping for wedding dresses, and they're all gorgeous. They fit, they don't fit, but they're all gorgeous. And then that one that you put on, you say, "This is it. This is perfect." And just because it felt perfect for that day. So
Right. You finally hit the match
yeah,
what the clothes helped evoke the feeling that you wanted to be feeling on
yeah.
your wedding day.
So I guess the challenge now is to translate that into what we look at in terms of what we want to create for ourselves. I mean, I mean, I'm saying way too many times, verbal crutch there, but you're in a place where you've transitioned your business a number of times, and now you're spending a lot of time creating video content, which thank you very much. I buy everything I can. Um, and I'm in a process of trying to redefine myself as a single individual who's still out in the world doing something, I haven't quite decided what, and trying to figure out what we are inside and how our clothing needs to represent that or should represent that is what and why I come to the word purposeful. Because to me, what I realized is for, I don't know, 40 years I've been sewing, not very well, better with you.
Oh,
So,
don't
um,
undersell yourself.
but I've always found a pattern, found a color or a fabric, sewed it together, and that was it. And I never thought about the what I wanted to accomplish with that garment. And so the word purposeful to me is a little bit like mindfulness in today's lexicon everywhere. You have to be mindful of the outcome at the very beginning before you start doing anything,
Which is
which
hard
is
to
why
do.
extremely hard to do, which is why the being purposeful in transition to me is such a why we started talking about this, and why I think it's such an important concept to a home sewer who's doing something other than just putting pieces of fabric together. I mean, if you're trying to create for somebody else or you're trying to create for yourself, you need to have the concept in your head about where you want to go with it, rather than just picking a pretty color that you like the look of.
Yeah. Years ago, I talked to somebody who worked in the pattern making industry, not the fashion industry, but the commercial patterns that home sewers use. And she said that they had done some sort of survey and that a surprising number into the majority of people made the pattern up in a fabric color that was similar to what was represented on the envelope. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, it's given to them. It's like, that's what that's supposed to be, I guess. So that I'll do that. So the that we have the amount of choice that we have in terms of the type of fabric we pick out and the color, as well as how the garment fits us and some other decorative elements, it can be really overwhelming. And I think you and I decided that it would be nice to do this YouTube conversation and make it available to the public, because it's we've had this conversation any number of times, similar
right.
types of conversations, and it goes very interesting places, because sewing garments for yourself or somebody else is a really big, comprehensive thing. It is a lot of
It
elements that
can be. Yeah,
you're pulling together. And that you and I both found that the transitions we've been through in our lives, and we've talked about those to some extent, but also that people are in transition all of the time. So you and I've talked about people who are single and maybe in the workforce or maybe not, and then they're deciding to get married. And so then that is a different definition of themselves, and how does that affect how they want to dress, or maybe it doesn't. But that's a transition, certainly for women, I think, transitioning from being a woman who is of childbearing age is one thing, but then once you start having children, then you're a mom, and then
right.
that is a different transition that you go through. And then as your children get older, there are these different stages that you go through where
Right.
I can remember one stage where I had started my business of doing custom clothing and was starting to teach a tiny bit, but not much. And I thought, all I want to do is get dressed in the morning and be able to wear that throughout the day and be comfortable. And I'm mom dropping kids off at school. I'm back at a work appointment, then I'm back at school volunteering, and then I'm at the soccer field or um,
Yeah,
whatever. And it's like, how do I find something to wear that bridges all of those things so that I'm
all
not
of those things. Yeah.
clothes 5 times a day?
Yeah, we're not royalty. We can't have our dressers out there for us. Yeah,
No.
yeah. Yeah,
But
and I think that also, I think that the other transition we talked about, and another reason to be purposeful is that we don't always sew for ourselves. So if you're more, I mean, a lot of my friends are sewing for their daughters or their grandkids. And so for their daughters, it's important to understand where the daughter wants to be and what she's doing. As with grandkids, I think are a little easier up until about 6 or 7, at which point in time they seem to put their stamp on what they like and don't like. I learned really early on not to do anything for my nieces because I had the picture of one of my nieces trying on what I thought was the cutest little dress out of Japanese cotton, smocking, all of that. And the look on her face was, I'm taking this off as soon as you finish taking this picture. And I never made another thing for her because it was clearly she had transitioned to, I'm going to pick out my own stuff. But so as sewers, we want to be able to give things to the people that we love. And a lot of expressions of love come in making things for people. But it helps to also understand what the purpose is behind that. Are we doing that just to be able to make something and give, or are we making something that we hope that that person actually wants and fits into their place in life and how they're viewing themselves as well? And that changes, as you say.
And that comes down to the backdrop of this whole conversation, which is that you have to be aware of the transition that other person is going, or their place in life. And if there's a recent transition or there's a
Yeah,
transition coming up, you have to be aware. It's fortuitous to be aware of that rather than the experience you had of making this
yeah.
adorable dress and the child thinking, I'm not
Never
wearing
wearing this. Yeah.
that.
I certainly hope that went to Goodwill for some other little girl to have some fun with it, but I've never been brave enough to ask. So I don't really want to know. But so I think that having an idea of what you want to actually achieve is one thing. I mean, I think a lot of artists, and sewing is an art. I think a lot of artists sit down and just whack it out. Um, but I think more of them try to figure out, they'll ponder what they want to do with whatever art form they're working with and what they want to pull out of the medium before they actually start. And I think that that's where we are in terms of being able to achieve something with sewing that's more than just functional.
Right.
So
It's meshing with the person's personality and their I'm going to call it their station in life, what's going on, their position in life at the moment in terms of whatever, job and marital status or, volunteerhood, there are tons of things, but how do you figure out all of those different elements so that you end up with a garment that is what I would refer to as successful, being something that person wants to wear.
yeah. And I think that the other thing is, you made the comment about the people duplicating the picture on the front of the pattern by and large. I think the other thing that being purposeful does is it allows us to give permission to ourselves to let our imagination, um, imagination run wild. So the problem with just seeing the picture is that many of us never gave ourselves permission to think outside of that box. This is what the company is saying, what kind of fabric to use. That color looks fine. I can wear that color. I'm just going to make it up that way. And we didn't give ourselves permission to actually think broader than that. Whereas if you're trying to be purposeful about what you're going to do, it not only gives you permission to do it, it kind of requires you to
Yeah,
think about it. And then you're going to achieve something that works better for what you need to do. It also ultimately saves a lot of money. This is sort of off topic, but you don't end up buying every piece of fabric that you see because it's pretty and you think you can make something out of it. Because now you look at it and think, well, now what does that actually say? Do I want to incorporate that into my wardrobe vocabulary.
Yes.
And so I find myself, I mean, I'm one of those people, I think a lot of people do it as well. My husband never believed this, but I believe that sewers accumulate fabric. And I find myself now going through the accumulation of fabric and knowing that it's either out of date because it's technically a fabric that people don't wear much anymore, like non-stretch fabrics. There aren't a whole lot of things that a lot of us wear that don't have some stretch in it, but also colors and prints that I realize I will never put on this body. It's never going to happen. So I might as well get rid of it. And then when I'm looking at, all the online scrolling that you can do to look at fabrics, I think, oh, that doesn't work. Cross that out. So it really ultimately probably allows you to focus more about what you want so that you can be more decisive about what you purchase and I don't know, be wiser about the choices.
Yeah, I would say be more, when you're more discerning about what you purchase, then your decisions resonate better. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, that I'm actually going to be able to use this, rather than kind of throwing paint at the wall, hoping it sticks. Now I'll just get this print and maybe it'll be okay for me,
yeah,
or not even, you may not even get there. I'll just buy this print because I like the print. And then you put
yeah,
the time and energy into making a shirt out of it, and you go, what was I thinking? This doesn't look, I don't feel great wearing this, or the print's too small, or it's
yeah,
all kind of muddy, or a host of different things. But it's that purposefulness behind the decision making process. And
saves
what I
time and money.
found, pardon?
It saves time and money.
Yeah. And what I found over the years of teaching is that often my presentations and topics that I'm talking about is I'm asking sewers, garment sewers, to be thinking about things.
Mhm.
Very often in a Zoom class, I'll be asked a question that theoretically could be answered very concretely, maybe yes or no, or and it's like, well, I can't answer that for you because I don't know
Right.
you. I don't know what kind, is. So somebody, for instance, might say, do you think I could wear a small calico print in a shirt? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know you well enough. I don't know what your colors are. I don't know how that's going to look on you. Have you spent the time in front of a mirror holding that up and some different color variations of it, or and then compared to other types of prints or solids? So it's I think some sewers want the quickness of a make, of being able to make
Mhm.
something. And I think part of what we're talking about is there's a lot of thinking that if it goes on ahead of time, in the long run, you're going to be happier with the
Right.
outcome. But that
Yep.
it does take some time and energy to be thinking about it. And I've seen both you and quite a number of other students that I've had the pleasure of working with over a long period of time embrace this thought. It's not quick. I have to do that work. I have to stand in front of the
Yeah.
mirror, what I call mirror play. I have to audition, 5, 6, 7, 10 fabrics, and then walk away from it and come back to it and go, okay, this one is a no. And then you have to have the strength to say,
Yeah.
yeah, I bought it, but it's no good. So it's going to go get passed on or go to
Yeah.
Goodwill. And
I I will
it's,
say that there are occasions that I will keep a fabric and make it up, knowing that I'm going to give it maybe to a woman's shelter or something like that, just because I want to learn how to work with it. So it's a different analytical challenge. Corduroy, for example, is one of those things that, I mean, working with corduroy to me is one of those challenges. So, and I have a lot of it. I used to wear a lot of it on the East Coast because it's warm in the winter. California, not so much. So I do a lot with that I know I'm going to give away just simply because I want to see how it makes up and what I can do with it. But and that's a completely different purpose.
I was going to say, it's still purposeful. It's a different type of purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm still edging into your, I think the greater percentage of prep work before you actually start sewing is probably more than 50%. And then the actual execution probably is, I don't know, 30 to 40%. So I haven't really edged all the way into that pre-work, although I'm working on it. So,
But you, just from the conversations you and I've had about transitions and purposeful sewing, you're tackling it in a way that I've never seen you tackle it before. And I can tell that it's starting to make more sense to you,
mhm,
but there are certain aspects of it. And then with this recent separation and divorce that you've gone through, I think it kind of came and smack hit you in the face is, I
definitely.
don't know what I want to wear. Who,
Yeah.
it's not who am
Who
I,
am I?
Nancy, but how do I want to present myself? I'm I'm keeping my core self, but I'm making my external self up to the world, and I have a choice as to how I want to
Yeah.
present
So I
myself.
find myself even like I go to the club once a week to go have dinner with a girlfriend. And she gave me the compliment one day that she knows on Wednesdays when she's going to have dinner with me, she thinks about what she's going to wear because she was always considered me to be very well dressed. And she wants me to be impressed with her for whatever she's wearing. Um, she's obviously very sweet. But so it made me start to think about what I put on when I go to the club for dinner, and how people who are way across the room see me versus how the woman that I'm having dinner with sees me, who's maybe 12 inches away from me, and realizing that those are two completely different looks, or two different impressions. I mean,
Yes,
obviously the silhouette that you wear, um, how the fabric hangs on you, I think, and how it drapes, but also things like prints and um, combination of colors. And when I was working, I would do what I would call kind of loosely color blocking with the garments, like a solid here, a solid skirt, and some sort of highlight someplace, which works great across the room, but isn't necessarily the same impact if you're just sitting next to somebody having dinner. So I'm
right.
starting to think more about the prints and the colors inside a fabric rather than just looking at something and say, I really like that. It'll make up into something cute.
I
So
think also there's a transition that happens when we have known that something works. You know that from your work life, you've been retired for quite a number of years, but in the workforce, you knew what worked for yourself. You were really
yeah,
confident in it. Those strong colors, a little bit of color blocking, a little punch here or there. And then how hard is it for us? And for me, I think it's hard to say, I I don't need that anymore, or it doesn't work
yeah,
for me anymore, because it's comfortable. We're accustomed to it. And
yeah,
so whenever we go into sort of uncharted territory, and that's part of this whole conversation about transitions, we're going into
yeah,
some sort of level of uncharted territory. And we don't know what it is that's going to be the perfect solution.
right. And it might be, as you say, one day it may be one thing, and another day you go wake up feeling completely different. It's not going to be that. Yeah, that's very true. And I know that at the very beginning, I started wearing all the stuff that I used to wear at work, very strong, bold colors. And then somebody actually made the comment to me, because of course I'm taking lots of advice these days from everybody. And somebody made the comment to me that you don't look approachable. And I thought, okay, this is not a stage of my life where I want to hold people at a distance. This is a stage of my life where I want to invite people in to get to know me. So I have to rethink what I'm doing with my clothing so that I look like somebody that is approachable.
Right, because that's something that you value and that you want. And so I often encourage my students and when I was doing custom work clients to make word lists about when you're wearing a garment that you feel good in, what is it that put some words to what that is. And that comprises broad scope. There are different levels of it, but in broad strokes, it gives you an idea of what you want your clothes to be saying about yourself. And approachability is important to you now.
Yeah, very much. And I had a thought there that just went completely away.
Well, that happens to all of us, doesn't it?
Wherever it went, I don't know. Yeah, that I think trying to figure out what those clothes are going to look like is one thing, and then trying not. The other thing I think is when we look at today's fashions and trends, they're all over the place. But I also wonder if that comfort zone, I'm so comfortable in a particular like silhouette and look, if I'm too comfortable and it becomes boring or kind of blah. And I don't know. And I think that goes back to color and choice of fabrics and maybe prints and all that kind of stuff. But I think you get comfortable in one kind of look, and trying to figure out how to change it up so that it's not the same look all the time is also a challenge. Like we talked about the dress that you have on today. You have you've mastered that particular dress, but as many times as I've seen you in that dress, and I now recognize the dress when I see you in it, you change enough things in it so that it's not going to be apparent to a lot of people that it's the same pattern, because you change enough of it. And I think trying to figure out what your kind of base silhouette is,
Yes.
and the base comfort level, then you can add variations on top of that to add that little bit of pop, or give you the variation from the day-to-day on top of the world to I just want to coast today. That you can still do it while keeping the kind of the base you consistent.
Right. I realized years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, somebody asked me how many basic patterns, what I refer to as master patterns, do I have that I work off of? And I started to really think about it. And I said, about 6 or 7. And they
Yeah.
said, all of what we see you in is coming from 6 or 7 patterns. I said, pretty much. Yep. It's what I'm really comfortable in. The fit is where I want it to be. The comfort is where I want it to be. And then I can change up the details, the fabric. I can, and to me, this hoodie dress, it's slightly off the shoulder, which is, I often wear more fitted things, but I feel presentable and professional at a certain level, but I don't feel so polished that I might be unapproachable. There's a
Right.
casual to it. And
Yeah.
I think it can be an instructive exercise when you wear something and you think, oh, I feel really good in this today, that you stop and make some notes about what do you mean by that? And make a note of how you're feeling that day, because some of us have very quiet days. And so some of my moods, it's like, I just want to sit back and get my work done. Don't talk to me. And other days
Yeah.
that I'm more outgoing. So it's important to note that, but also, why is it that you're feeling so comfortable in that? Certainly the cloth itself is going to have an influence in that, but the fit and the cut of the
And it's color.
neckline and the color,
Yeah.
absolutely.
One of the things that I have ever so reluctantly in sort of taken on board is the importance of making notes. I've never been a journal person or any of that kind of stuff. And I realize now that I have 2 or 3 notebooks scattered around the house that are just about sewing and clothes. And what I've done with a particular pattern, what I liked or didn't like, that which is very pattern specific, but a little bit more what you're talking about, which is what appealed to me and why.
Right. How do
So
I feel when I'm wearing this?
trying to actually take the moment to capture that, put it down someplace so that you remember it. Because if you're like me, you have to write it down or you don't remember it. But it's very important to actually take that moment, capture it in time, and put words to it.
Yes. And I personally feel I'm a big word person. I play word games all of the time. I enjoy writing. It's not always easy, but I enjoy writing. But I think the value of words is it helps us capture an idea or a concept or a feeling, and it helps us be able to define it so that we can get there again. And
Yeah.
it may not be a word, it might be a phrase or a string of words to capture that, but it's the matter of being able to identify what that
And
was.
you might refine it over time. It's like the
Oh,
word might not be perfect, but it gets you back to what you were thinking at the time.
yes, absolutely. So
So yeah, I have to laugh. You've got me onto the taking notes.
finally, yeah.
Yeah, finally. It's only been 20 years.
The resistance was there, but I
Yeah.
do think even if you're not a word person, and even if it seems like, oh, this is really hard to do, just if you can get yourself to jot it down, particularly in light of this conversation, what is the most recent transition you have been through? Are you going through a transition now? I feel like the times in my life where I've put on a garment that in prior weeks or days, it's something that I've always like, oh, I love wearing this. I'm really comfortable wearing this. And I put it on one day and I go, I don't know, why am I wearing this today?
Yeah.
That usually is a sign of some sort of transition that's starting to
Yep.
take place. And it may not be a great big external transition, like getting married or having a baby or getting
Yeah.
divorced, getting a new job. It can be a very subtle transition of I've been I'm a meditator, and I enjoy having a very small meditation practice, and there are certain phrases I use to myself, mantras, and I think over time some of them influence how I present myself. And I think that's a good thing. That's something I've been working towards. But I think sometimes the transition can be as subtle as, instead of this being an external phrase that I am saying to myself, it is starting to become a part of me.
Mhm.
And that those transitions are very important to take note of, as well as the bigger external transitions.
Oh, I think very much because they will influence how you want to present yourself in the world. And as we started with this conversation, you present yourself in the world fully clothed.
Yeah.
So
There,
it makes a difference. Yeah.
I would say the vast majority of us, that is how we present ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's no getting around it.
So what is it that it's the first 3 or 6 seconds that somebody sees you that they form an immediate impression about you?
Yeah,
And
there's been
you know,
research done about that.
yeah, and this is naked and all the rest of it has clothes on. So uh, you have to capture that moment.
Yes, yeah. And I think some of the things we've alluded to, keeping your notes and your list of words about when you are wearing something that you like wearing, that you feel comfortable in, how is it that you feel, as well as doing the homework of what colors look good on you, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. It
So I
all,
always recommend that somebody do that color, having your colors read. I always recommend that to people because I think that we don't necessarily see ourselves. We see the color and we decide we like the color and therefore it probably looks good on us. I remember having mine done and I thought I was a taupe person. I like taupe, like kind of a slate blue. That was my kind of go-to combination. And she had this swatch of fabric across my chest, and she uncovered the taupe. And I just looked at the expression of the people watching me, and I went home and took everything out of my closet that was taupe and gave it away. So just clearly that is a color I should never wear. So I always recommend that for people because that's, I think, a big part of it.
I think it's helpful to have your colors done. It's a very subjective, so you could have your colors read by 3 different people and get slightly different results. But I think you can approach it yourself. And part of what you said made me think to say this, which is that she unveiled, she had the one color drape and then she revealed the taupe. And there was just something about how you saw yourself in the mirror, as well as reading the expressions in the room, that all of a sudden you go, oh, that doesn't do
Yeah,
anything for me. I don't come alive at all. And what I
right.
find, you can do a certain amount of that on your own. And what's helpful to me is I'm looking in the mirror and I get one impression, but then I take a picture and I look at those pictures on a computer screen, and the colors might change a little bit, although generally I think computer screens are much better about that than 15 years ago, certainly. But having that different depth of field makes a big difference. Or you can ask somebody, if you're wearing something and you wonder if it's a good color for yourself, and you're, in have a household or going to a party or whatever, just say to somebody, could, on and off this evening, could you take me a couple of pictures of me, 2 or 3
Yeah,
pictures? And then you look at those pictures, and instead of saying, oh, that's an interesting cut, or that's, one thing or the other about that, but it's that you actually are able to see how that color makes your face look. And what we
yeah.
want is our face to look alive. And I
Alive.
expect
Yeah.
the taupe made you look drained and
Dead. Yeah.
dead.
Or on my way to dead.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another thing that happens in my experience is when we're wearing colors that do not flatter us. One way I often put it is that we look kind of sickly, like you're not having a
Yeah.
very good day today. But some of
Yeah.
it is that where our eye continues to go down and examine the garment. And my goal always is to have the garment and including the colors, bring the eye back up to the face. It can
Right.
travel the garment and say, well, that's interesting, but it's always back up to the face. It's the face that
Yeah.
we have so much communication with, certainly in the words, but also in our facial expressions.
So if we were going to sum up this conversation, you can tell that I was in business. If we were going to sum up this conversation for somebody who's been listening to it and trying to figure out how to start implementing this concept of being purposeful, where would you, what I would guess is one of the things we would suggest to somebody is use that word game, define yourself, or define where you're going with maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 words. And then think about the garments that you currently own that help you achieve those adjectives. Would you say that that's fair?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I would qualify your first statement, which I think is to think about your life and define it in terms of how much of a transitional phase are you in? Are you at the cusp of something just about to happen? Or are you coming out of the other end of it? Or you feel like you're kind of in the middle, but every once in a while you think, I don't know where I'm really going in
Right.
life right now. So define that first, and then and this could take a number of days or a couple of weeks to think about it, as you've
Yeah.
experienced
Yeah.
months
Yes. Yeah.
to really think about it, and then make your word list. And the phrasing I like to use is, when I feel good and I'm wearing a garment, this is what I feel. When I feel good about myself, when I'm wearing a garment and I feel good about myself, what are the things that I'm feeling inside? Approachable, confident, feminine would be one for me. A little bit arty is something that I want something a little bit unusual, that there might be a little bit of a surprise. For other people,
Yeah,
it might be, preppy or suave or, whatever. So you can put that word list together and
I
it'll
have
get
to
defined.
I have to laugh because I had to put together my word list, and one of mine was casually elegant. And when I look at my clothes, they're not there. But
But
yeah,
knowing you is for as long as I have, but also having had recent conversations, especially over the last year about this type of thing, casually elegant, that's definitely a part of you,
yeah,
that I can see that that's part of what you want to start to evoke in your
yeah.
clothes, have your clothes evoke now. Nancy, this is so interesting to me, even though we've talked about it several times before. I find it endlessly fascinating. I really appreciate your time and your thoughts. And I look forward to another session about this idea of purposeful sewing. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your friendship and I appreciate your teaching. And I hope this helps other people do too.
All right, everybody, we'll be back.
Bye bye.